use it for this. And then, we're having some great.
You know, 2 years from now, I thought
We might have a gap.
but right now, right now.
Okay, it's 6 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. I think we've got a rather long meeting to get through.
Could we stand out for something?
This would be a great time to silence your cell phone, and I'll do that myself. And with that being said, we'll start on item 2. All right, I'm supposed to go off of this guy here. First item up is A-2301, resolution to amend UDO Article 2, definitions of terms used to replace Section 202 RRR, general definitions, use, non-conforming, to amend UDO. Article 2, definitions of terms used to add Section 203 BB, housing definitions, planned manufactured home community, non-conforming, to amend UDO. Article 4, general procedures to replace Section 403, continuance of non-conforming lots, uses, and structures. So I guess Newton is up.
Charles said it was my show tonight. I don't know whether that's good or bad.
So it's showtime.
Let me give you all a little bit of background on all of the things that we are doing tonight. And there's several. First of all, we have ordinances that are needed in order to bring our zoning procedures into compliance with amendments to the zoning procedures law. Let me start over. We have ordinances coming up that are required to bring our ordinances into compliance with zoning procedures law. We have ordinances that are not zoning ordinances specifically and don't have to be approved pursuant to zoning procedures law, but that deal with issues that Spalding County has had with EPD. And those are coming to you tonight as well. And there are 2 of those. And then we are also dealing with an issue that we have had for years, dealing with non-conforming uses and how we define non-conforming uses and what evidence we have that requires addressing non-conforming uses. And then there is a specific provision in that dealing with how we have dealt with manufactured homes as non-conforming uses in the past. And the first one we have is the non-conforming use provision. Now, we have been working on these, even though the paper was flying over the weekend. We have been working on these ordinances for the better part of 2 months. And as of this afternoon, I sent you version 5. Evie, you said you've got it on a flash drive.
Would you like the green, the clean line or the red line?
Let's do the red line first. I mean, they're the same, but that way you can see the changes from the last one y'all would have received. And I also have, if you prefer, I have paper copies if you're more comfortable using a paper copy to review. If y'all want it, be happy to pass it out. So y'all tell me what you prefer. Hang on, give me one
I
second.
think we can see the difference.
Yes, I have both red line and clean.
Yeah, I think we can see it over
Okay.
here. So,
Okay. All right.
that's my opinion.
Can you pull up the old UDO section so they can see how we dealt with non-conforming uses even? To refresh your memory. I know that all of you have read every word in every draft of every ordinance draft and went back and compared it to the existing code provision so that you would be able to identify the changes. if you can pull the code up, it's section 403. There you go. All right. You can see that the old code provision is a very generic provision that applies to all types of nonconforming uses with a single brush. And you can see that there are no criteria for assessing whether a nonconforming use exists or should be able to be continued. And we have for years had people who came into the development office and would come to Charles and come to Eva and say, I've got this old rundown building that used to be a rendering plant out on Flint River, and it's zoned AR, and I want to reactivate that because it's a non-conforming industrial use in an agricultural zone. Now, this doesn't happen a lot, but when it happens, it is difficult to resolve.
Sticky.
That person will say, well, we know that this used to be done. It's an industrial facility. We know it was used for industrial purposes. Therefore, I should be able to reactivate that. And by the way, somebody had a business license in it for some period of time for it, and that may have lapsed. And so we want you to allow us to reactivate it. They are adamant that they have the right to do it. And the reality is we have, like I say, a generic provision dealing with nonconforming uses that has not been really changed or reviewed since the ordinance was developed. So an opportunity arose for us to address section 403. And what we have done with this draft is divide nonconforming uses into what type of nonconforming use they are. It is. You can have a nonconforming lot. You can have a nonconforming use. You can have a non-conforming structure. And the impact of each of those and the significance of each of those is very different. So if you'll look, and I'm going to segment this discussion between general provisions and then we're going to talk about the manufactured home provisions. But if you look at the new definition is use nonconforming a lawful lot, structure, or use of land that existed at the time of the adoption of the zoning ordinance or at the time of adoption of an amendment to the zoning ordinance. That provision was not in there before. That no longer conforms to the regulations contained therein because of the adoption of the zoning ordinance or the adoption of an amendment to the zoning ordinance. So there are three different categories there: lot, structure, and use. All right? If you'll look down then, and this is on page 2 of the ordinance, Eva, section 5, page 2, and you will see general procedures, and we divide general procedures up between nonconforming lots, nonconforming uses, and nonconforming structures. And there are different standards applicable to each one of those. Now, what is the legal standard here? The legal standard is based upon the intent of the property owner. If the property owner has decided to forego a use or allowed a use to lapse and they intended to do that, that is the legal standard. Now, how do you get to what constitutes intent to abandon a use? All right. So we're going to walk through that. So let's look at nonconforming lots. Nonconforming lots, pretty simple. If you have a lot of record at the time of adoption of the zoning ordinance or an amendment to the zoning ordinance that does not meet the size requirements for that zoning district, that lot of record still has development rights attached to it, okay, as an existing lot of record. We do require that if you've got 2 of them, you combine them, and they're together. We've been pretty clear on nonconforming lots. Nonconforming uses are much harder. So, the key is, look at subpart 3. And has the standard provisions: nonconforming use can't be enlarged, nonconforming use cannot be moved unless it eliminates the nonconformity. And 3, and this is the key section here, if a nonconforming use is abandoned for any reason for a period of more than 6 months, any subsequent use shall conform to the requirements of this ordinance. A nonconforming use shall be determined to be abandoned if 2 or more of the following conditions exist, and which shall be deemed to constitute an intent on the part of the property owner to abandon the nonconforming use. Disconnection of utilities, the property's in disrepair, signs related to the nonconforming use have been removed, equipment for the operation of the nonconforming use has been removed, no occupational tax or license has been paid for the use. And then we do have a catch-all that allows Charles to look at other factors that might be applicable. And then we do have a section here dealing with uses for open lots, where a nonconforming use of land is at issue. And the bottom line there is, when a nonconforming use of land has been changed to a conforming use, it shall not be used again. And nonconforming uses of open land shall only be converted to a conforming use. So, then that takes us to structures. All right? And this is fairly simple. A nonconforming building or structure continues to be used. However, it cannot be enlarged or altered in a way that increases its nonconformity. Now, if we go to section, or page 5, section D, this involves replacement of nonconforming uses that are damaged or destroyed. And that's a fairly standard provision that says if your nonconforming structure is damaged or destroyed by anything other than your own deliberate act, the structure may be restored to the same or lesser size in the same location, with restoration to commence in 12 months. Building materials and architectural details conform to the requirements at that time. And the nonconforming use can be resumed in the nonconforming structure on a lesser scale, but shall not be enlarged or intensified. All right, those things are pretty standard. The key here is that we are dividing nonconforming uses into the type of nonconforming use and setting standards for each of the types of nonconforming uses.
Could I just ask a quick
Yes,
question?
ma'am.
Now, under D3, the materials shall be conform to the requirements, the old requirements or the new ones?
The new ones.
Okay, is that assumed, and I just didn't,
I can make a change on that. I'm going to bet that Charles has had experience with this type of nonconforming use ordinance, and probably was appalled at the provisions we had in section 403 when he got here to look at it.
If I may comment.
You may.
What I like about this update, it allows our staff to work with the citizens. You have to have strict laws, of course, but you also want to be able to be understanding depending on the situation that our citizens are dealing with. So this allows some room for us to operate. And what I really love about this, of course, you all just went through the tornado situation, so this is going to help with that. So we know we're going to see some applications coming in as a result of the tornado. So this would be, this language would definitely help our staff in terms of how we regulate and enforce moving forward.
Okay. Any more questions on that portion of the ordinance?
Is there an appellate process to this?
I'm sorry?
Is there an appellate process to this?
Yes, if, Frank, if Charles makes a decision, because this falls within his purview, at least at the beginning, the standard appeal process to the Board of Appeals in 410 would work.
Thank you.
Newton, I did have a question about that 12-month time that you had on the restoration.
Mm-hmm. That's on page 5, John?
Yes. Does that mean there physically has to be something done within 12 months, or within that 12-month period, they have indicated that they have a plan and they're going to do something, or? Because I see a situation like we had with the recent tornado where it might take them several months to wrangle the insurance company or whatever. And probably can't make any decisions till they know they're gonna have some money to do something with.
John, it can be tied, this just says restoration shall begin. This can be tied to any standard that you want. Issuance of a permit, in an extreme case, issuance of a CO. It can be tied to whatever standard you want. If y'all want to change, just tell us how to change it.
I mean, the language seems reasonable to me. I just wish there was a way that when people, I'm dealing with the tornadoes, I mean, people need to know that so they can get cracking on that. I mean, there's still a bunch of houses over on West Broadway, West Broad, East Chapel, that trees are still in the middle of them.
Blue tarp all over the
Mhm.
place.
Thank God for that.
Or John, if y'all want to add more time, I mean, again, that's why we brought it up, that's why you have it in front of you now.
Now, they ought to be able to start something within 12 months. I think maybe that's the thing on,
Well,
what's the definition of
I
begin?
agree, but I just think there could be extenuating circumstances for, you know,
Because it was so extensive.
one size isn't gonna necessarily fit all.
Getting laborers at this point in time to do a project, some form of a letter of intent might,
They have in the file.
yeah, to have.
Yeah.
Maybe have a 12-month, a letter of intent for 12 additional months, something like that.
If necessary, if
If,
needed.
right,
As needed.
right. Well, I'm sure people want to get their stuff fixed as soon as possible. Most of them
So
do.
Nick, you'd have a letter of intent within 12 months, and then another 12 months to commence construction?
Does that sound reasonable?
That sounds generous, but
I would, yeah, I'd say overly generous, but in this circumstance, maybe we need to be a little overly generous.
Right, because we've already been there. We've
Commence
seen this.
construction or get a permit?
I would say begin construction.
For the second 12 months?
By the end of the 24th month, they should have began
Work.
doing the foundation, doing something there that would be significant.
Eva, what are y'all seeing what are y'all seeing in the office for tornado damage?
Most of the repairs that we have gotten so far are just for minor repairs, roofs. Some of them are siding, decks. We haven't gotten to the extreme of where they have to rebuild homes from the foundation up. It is gonna come, so I think it would be best for us to go ahead and get that portion out. Do we give people an extension, or is there a way that they can get an extension with a letter of intent? So I think this is the best time to get this out of the way, because it is gonna come. People are starting to get their insurance money in as well.
So I've got a little bit different view if the chairman would afford me.
sure.
So for purposes of the ordinance, I truly believe that the restoration shall begin within 12 months of damage or destruction and diligently carried to completion is a proper way of managing the common way of doing business. And then for extenuating circumstances, then the Board of Commissioners could come in and say, due to the emergency condition, we are going to extend a certain amount of time, and they would be afforded the opportunity to extend the time, whether it's 6 months or a year, they would be able to do that, which would offset this, this requirement. But on a day-to-day basis, in how our staff is actually managing the process, I think this is a very consistent way for how we should manage the process on a daily basis.
I'm good with
See,
that. I
as
just
written.
As written.
think there needs to be a safety valve there
Yeah, I
if
think that
something bad happens.
And I agree with you, but I think the safety valve becomes management by exception instead of a management by policy.
Right.
Right.
We'll just give them all 24 months regardless.
Correct.
I agree.
Yeah, I'll go along with
And you don't want that dragged out any more so than
Right.
it already has been.
So for someone who is not experiencing damage that was a result of an emergency, and they're just dragging their feet because
And they do that.
they, you know, Bimini is calling, they need to step up.
Well, this area was declared an emergency area, wasn't it? Well, that's probably the key right there.
That would be the management by exception.
Now, you could get special exception on that if you had to.
Correct. Mr. Chairman, we do have someone who has signed up for a 23-01, and with your permission, I would ask that you open up for public hearings so that we could hear once Mr. Newton is complete.
that. Okay.
Are there any more questions about what we've been through, about that provision? These provisions of use, lot,
Well-
and structure?
Well constructed.
All right, then let's go back and pick up and talk about the non-conforming manufactured home parks. The county has had issues with this for the past 10 years and never been able to get it particularly resolved in a way that was either enforced or enforceable. So let's go back to page 2. Excuse me. And you will see that we have developed a new definition for a manufactured home community non-conforming. We define what you would call a mobile home park or trailer park in our ordinance as a manufactured home community. Now, in most instances, well, I'm sorry, let me go someplace else first. The appropriate zoning district for manufactured home communities is R3, our multifamily class. But the problem is, the parks are much older than that provision in that zoning district. And most of them are non-conforming uses in AR1. So we have had consistent issues arise regarding what happens when a manufactured home is moved out of the park, the pad remains, the pad may remain for a while, and nothing comes in to replace it, and then there's a request for a permit for a manufactured home to go on the old pad. All right. Manufactured home parks have been the subject of a fair amount of litigation involving zoning cases. And the general rule comes out of 2 cases, one out of Douglasville and one out of Coweta County. And those cases hold that a manufactured home park can expand to the boundaries of potentially expand to the boundaries of its property. Now, when Chad Jacobs was here, he attempted to implement a policy that said if the manufactured home was removed from the pad and the pad sat empty, then the right to have a manufactured home on that pad went away. Under the law of unintended consequences, that encouraged the manufactured home owners to keep manufactured homes in a horrible condition, sitting there for as long as they could remain together as a manufactured home, or as it could remain together. that did not work. Now, since they are zoned AR1, y'all are familiar with what the rules are on this, that if you have a non-conforming use, it must, if it's going to be continued, it must then comply with the requirements of the underlying zoning district that it's in. So under that scenario, it would require somebody in a manufactured home park to have a 3-acre tract to replace the home. Now, that's not practical. And as it turned out, thanks to Mr. Blackshear's Open Records Act request, and he's here to talk about this tonight, we learned that the county had never enforced that. So, the County Board of Commissioners placed a moratorium. Once this issue arose, the county placed a moratorium on manufactured homes being placed into non-conforming places, non-conforming parks, zoned AR1 until we could address it. So, this ordinance also attempts to do that. So, at section 203, within our housing definitions, you will see that we have defined a manufactured home community non-conforming. And that is defined as a lot used or intended as a residential area occupied by more than one manufactured home, where the resident owns or rents the manufactured home and rents the manufactured home space, and which manufactured home community is not located in the multiple family R3 district. All right. Now, let's talk about the provisions dealing with manufactured homes, and let's flip over to page 5 even. Now, one thing that we have required is that the number of manufactured home spaces, and we have a separate definition in the definition section for a manufactured home space. So, we have required that the manufactured home spaces be identified on a lot map that is to be filed every year with Spalding County as of January 1st. And Eva can report that by and large, because we've looked at this, most of the owners of parks have complied with that. Correct, Eva?
That's correct.
So therefore, we have, while it's not a formal survey plat, we have documentation of how many lots are in the park. So under this ordinance, we allow manufactured homes to be placed on manufactured home spaces that are shown on the lot map, irrespective of how long that particular lot space, mobile home space, might have been empty. All right. Now, there are some standard provisions regarding installation and our code dealing with unfit buildings and structures that are referenced in here and will apply to the manufactured homes that are being replaced. Now, Eva and I worked, before Charles was able to join us, Eva and I worked with Jordan, and we went to Ponderosa. Jordan has acquired Ponderosa. And Ponderosa has always been one of the parks in the county that's in the worst condition. We have had any number of issues out there over the years. So we discussed with him providing some increase in the aesthetic of the park, providing a designated parking space for the vehicles, providing some landscaping, some tree planting, not big trees so that when the wind blows over the whole home's destroyed, and some shrubs, and an outdoor space, a deck, for example, and those are listed on page 6. And when they would come in for that permit to place the home on that space, when they showed the plan and had that plan in place, then Charles's office would issue the CO. Now, one thing, and Jordan, I apologize for this, but I missed this. You and I talked about a playground. All right, I added in a playground. I put no requirements in it, but a playground to be separated out for resident children of 2,500 square feet. All right. And that is on the last version you have, that, and so, if you have a lot map documenting each manufactured home community nonconforming, then that lot map will be revised to identify a designated recreation area of not less than 2,500 square feet in size, primarily for the use of a playground, as a playground for resident children. Now, on its face, those are not particularly they're not stringent requirements. But on its face, you might look at it and say, well, it's not much. Having been out to Ponderosa, having ridden through A and B, it's a lot better than what we got now.
Yes.
Now, I sent to you all this afternoon a response from the council for A and B, because the next section is more controversial. One of the things that we learned going through this process is that this county has no record of how utilities are provided to the homes that are in the parks. We have no information on the condition of roads. We have no real information on whether or not the homes that are present are still code compliant. We don't have information on water. And I don't know whether y'all are aware of this, but before Kelly left us, a significant problem arose with Pine Glen. Some of these are on private wells. Some of those private wells are not connected to public water. And in the case of Pine Glen, the water system petered out. And Steve, tell me if I'm right, but Pine Glen has now connected to Spalding County water.
They have,
In Jordan's case at Ponderosa, he has a well, but he also has a backup connection to county water. Is that correct, Jordan?
It is.
All right. So, we have no idea what shape, what conditions are, how utilities are provided, and we get complaints. So, the controversial part of, I think the only controversial part of this is going to be that Charles has the authority under this to bring the parks in so we can get information on how these services are being provided, what services are being provided, and then if it's truly deficient and there are severe complaints or service issues regarding those, he can issue a potential notice of deficiency and tell them to get it corrected. Then, going forward, and on a schedule that Charles can set, the parks would come in about once every 3 years and review this again. Now, I've reviewed this, we've reviewed this with Charles. He got hit with it almost when you're right the first week you're in the door. I don't think he has any great desire to be the manufactured home police, but at the same time, we don't feel like it is unreasonable to get this information so that the county has it and has it available as if and when some type of service issue would arise.
Yeah.
So, bottom line is, now you will note that we did not put a size restriction on here. That's because, in terms of looking at the compatibility of what's out there, they range from Class A to Class C. And again, this is we put provisions in here, with Eva and I working initially on this, that would be an improvement to whatever we have out there, but not inconsistent with the requirements of getting it upgraded as homes are replaced. So, that's what you have, and, Jordan, is William Downs gonna be here tonight?
I don't think so.
Okay. I sent you this afternoon a red line of this ordinance. We provided this as a courtesy to any of the manufactured home park owners that wanted it. And he did respond, y'all have a copy of it, and he struck out everything in section 6. So, which is fine, I mean, that's his right to do, and y'all can look at it and y'all can look and see what he proposed to delete. And I believe Jordan is going to talk to you about the life safety, recommendation on the life safety code and an alternative to that. So if y'all have any questions before Jordan talks, and Jordan, I'm assuming you're the only speaker. Okay. This evening. If y'all have any questions on where we are with this before Jordan comes up to talk.
Could I just add, is this the we looking at here, is this the red line or the clean?
You're looking at my,
You're looking at,
my red line.
I
okay?
can show the red line of the,
From William Downs?
mhm.
Okay.
So he took some things out.
I think I was more interested in what Newton just referenced, that number
There
6.
it is. You can see he's struck through.
Okay. Okay.
But to be clear, Jordan, what William filed or sent to us is consistent with your position, correct?
It would be our best case scenario. You know, there are some points that are gonna be more important than others.
Okay.
All right, before we get started there, Mr. Parliamentarian, do you mind terribly if we open up the public hearing and then Mr. Vice Chair can come and speak? So we can entertain a motion.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to open up a public discussion.
Second.
Second, okay. You're open.
Mr. Vice Chair, if you'll come forward and state your name and your address for the record, please.
My name is Jordan Blackshear. I live at 654 Brook Circle here in Griffin. And so, and I only have 3 minutes. I could probably use a lot more than that, so I'll just try to.
Could you speak a little louder and get closer to the mic, please?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Barely.
Okay, so pervious surface, okay? So our parking pads have always been asphalt. We have an approximately 20 by 20 or 20 by 25 parking space at every home site, and those have always been paved. So a literal reading of this, you know, is gravel, and I think that's just an oversight. I think Newton assumed that we had gravel parking spaces, but they are paved. And so, you know, we would not want to bust up our asphalt parking spaces and put down gravel just to conform to the ordinance, okay? The 100 square foot improved open spaces, which could be satisfied by a deck, but really a 10 by 10 deck or some variation of that, like 8 by 13, or I mean, whatever you would have to have, it's going to be so large that, you know, really it's going to interfere with our ability to provide septic service in the park. So we have, you know, probably 30 to 35 feet in between each mobile home. And, pretty much all of that is taken up by drain field for our septic systems. And so in the event that we had to replace that, which we're currently in the process of replacing a huge number of them because they've needed it for a long time, we would have to take the deck off. Typically, we would have a 4x4, just space for them to be able to egress out of the home. That's more typical, right, to what we have now. Now, I am open to having, because of course every home has 2 decks, one at the front door, one at the back door, 100 square feet combined, I think could work. And then also, this particular park, not every park in the county, but we do have 120 square foot concrete pads at each home site, and so those were originally intended as a patio area. So I would hope that that would, qualify for the improved open space, and so we wouldn't need the very big deck. And I think Newton may have, I can only guess, but he did see those pads, and I sort of thought that maybe that was his intent there with the improved open space. The playground, of course, I didn't know about that until just now. I like the idea of a playground. It's something that has to be constantly monitored. It could interfere with our ability to obtain insurance on the park. Okay, that is an insurance thing. I would need to look into that some more. Probably the biggest issue, what William Downs had with number 5, and Newton said, basically, the intent, what I heard, is that a notice of deficiency would only be issued for a severe issue in the park. And, if there's ever a severe issue, right, I want to take care of it. And I think I can speak for the other park owners in the county that, that needs to be fixed, obviously. But we are concerned about abuse of that, basically. And I have no reason to doubt Charles and his competency or his willingness to work with the community. But there have been people in his position in the past that I've had direct, dealings with that, we would be scared that they would find very nitpicky things that, and then just try to shut us down, right, or prevent our ability to bring in homes. And so we are concerned about that because that's kind of been the pattern of enforcement in the past, So I think that more or less covers it. I just want to sort of say there's a lot of people in Spalding County who, for ages, have relied on manufactured housing in order to have a roof over their heads. There's a lot of people out there who cannot afford to live in a $300,000 house that's 2,500 square feet. They just can't do it, and they're not going to be able to. And, giving them a decent place to live, is what we want to do. And, we've spent close to $1 million on the Ponderosa in the past 6 months, and it needed every penny of that, but, we just, we would like to work with the county. I'm somebody who all it takes is a phone call, and we got this moratorium put on us, and it just, especially after the tornado, all we're trying to do is get some houses back in here, and it just really kind of, doesn't feel great. So I'm hoping we can reach a resolution on this. There may be some things that I neglected to bring up, but I think that pretty much covers it.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Before Jordan
Respond to
goes,
that.
can I, Jordan, the intent of the pervious surface was to save money so you didn't have to do the concrete pad.
Yeah,
And that can be revised to say pervious or impervious surface.
And that would fix that issue completely. We've always had asphalt, and that's what we have, so we wouldn't want to downgrade to gravel.
Right. Because we had the discussion out there, because I pointed out my parking lot at my office is gravel.
Right.
in order to facilitate, not stop runoff.
Yeah.
When Eve and I were out there, I saw pads, concrete pads. Are those the patios that you're referencing, or?
Yes. So those are 8 by 15, 120 square foot.
Then that satisfies the requirement. I assume the trailer sits to the side, one side or the other of it.
Yes, and the only thing I'll add, so, you know, the door typically is right at the pad. So back when the parks were developed in the 70s, you know, decks were not common. They would just have a set of stairs that would come down onto the pad.
That's what we saw.
Code now requires a landing, right? So the 4x4 deck typically would sit on that pad, right? So it does take away a little bit from the pad. Then you also have the deck, so.
That's all.
You good?
Would you mind, Chairman, closing the public hearing?
Okay. I need a motion to close the hearing. So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded, we're closed. Okay, Newton, I guess I want to clarify, are you good with the proposed changes that he wanted as far as the
I don't have a problem.
parking areas and the deck?
I don't have a problem with putting impervious or pervious surface
Okay.
to, and if he has, if the concrete pads we saw are used for that, then he's in compliance with the 10 by 10 requirement. So it's just a matter of getting it cleaned up, making it look better, have some plantings around the trailer, having the parking space demarcated. When we were out there, you saw cars, you saw cars kind of everywhere, okay? And the goal was to have parking pads for them.
Okay, we have any other discussion up front here?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
No.
I want to make sure there's some clarification in regards to what Mr. Blackshear was asking for in regards to the playground. What information you want to give to us as we're still pondering this draft?
Well, so, you know, I haven't really had time to think about the requirement for a playground. I think it's a great idea, you know, really. One thing about it, so septic kind of controls everything in these places, right? They were built dense for septic. I mean, all the septic tanks are in, they're there. But when you take a 2,500 square foot, you know, I mean, is there a place to put it? I mean, because you don't want to put it on top of a septic system. I believe we do have a place to put one in the Ponderosa, but this ordinance is not about just the Ponderosa. It's going to govern every mobile home park in the county. I have 2 other parks in the county where I know for a fact we do not have a place to put one. We would have to clear out the woods, and which we could do, but it would be, I believe there might be some drainage issues. I mean, you're just going to get into a lot of unforeseen stuff. I mean, the fact is that we're not developed with a playground there, and so adding one after the fact, you know, some parks it'll be possible, some it is not. I know A and B has a playground, but I don't think it's 2,500 square feet. And I know all the parks in the county pretty well. I don't think any of them have a playground. So, and I can't tell you because I don't own every park. I mean, I don't know whether there'll be a place to put it or not. I think a certain amount of this is, you know, when you open things up and allow people to infill their empty lots, it incentivizes investment into the parks, right? You can increase the revenue of the park. And, you know, we've got every incentive to make it a desirable place to live. I mean, for a long time, Spalding County just said, you can't do anything with these places. And so basically everyone said, well, we're going to have to just operate with what we have, and we need to cut cost and just don't add, you know, any improvements at all because we'll never get the money back. But so I think a certain amount of just seeing where the owners take it, now that they can fill them up, you know, to what they originally were, no more, no bigger than they were originally built. You know, maybe some playgrounds pop up. I mean, I can't say for sure. You know, I think it'd be a great addition in the Ponderosa, and I can think of a spot where we could put one. But you're definitely gonna have some parks that cannot. So I would probably say that needs to be taken out, really, to be honest.
Newton, if I could, you know, in some of the other developments that we've looked at and stuff in the past, we've had playgrounds or walking paths or other options. You know, could we open it up where we could have just some amenity to accommodate exercise for the folks there at the place that could tie in maybe with a walking path around the place or something like that, that could be kind of considered in there as part of it?
Jordan's not restricted, or any other park developer is not restricted from potentially doing that, Bruce. Let me tell you how the idea came, and Jordan and I discussed it on site. I had just forgotten to include this in the first few drafts. When I went out there to look at it, school was out, and there were children just here and there. It looked like they had no place to go play, and we talked about having a playground. And Jordan's response was exactly as it is now. We made the assumption that if that was the condition that was there at Ponderosa, it probably was a prevalent condition. So the goal of this was to have them identify a designated recreation area, but you will see it doesn't provide for any specific requirement in there. And if somebody wanted to come in and change that in terms of having, and I might add, we have designated recreation area of 2,500 square feet. We don't tell them how to calculate or where to calculate 2,500 square feet. Okay. So I don't see how that, what you're talking about is necessarily precluded. Do you agree with that, Sean?
I agree.
So the goal, and particularly because, like I say, these are old parks. They're not in great shape, haven't been in great shape in years. And to come in and make a one-size-fits-all requirement for a playground, I didn't feel like would be particularly successful. So that's the reason it is defined and the requirement is as it is.
Yeah, but in there, in number 5, it says a designated recreational area or not less than 2,500 square foot. So again, you're giving them the possibility they can do something different.
Correct.
For that, but just some kind of a recreational amenity. So if you didn't have the 2,500 square foot, you could do something else to meet the.
Well, the walking trail could be part of the 2,500 square feet, it's just calculated differently.
Yeah.
But I do put in there, primarily for use as a playground for resident children, because that's what I saw.
Yeah.
Mr. Galloway, you might, after the word area, put a parentheses, or areas. So that if you had to split the 2,500 square feet up into 2 different areas, you could do that. I don't want to just drop that altogether because I'm probably the oldest serving person on this board, and the manufactured housing has been an issue with us from day one. And you've had a lot of people who don't really care what they look like. And I think it is up to this board to make sure that we do everything we can without restricting your ability to get an investment, get a return on your investment. The people who live there feel like they're living in a good place.
Well, I'm on the same page with you there.
I think you're going to have to just work with us on some stuff. Apparently, Mr. Galloway and Charles have indicated a willingness to work with you on some things. And I think that we're just going to have to work together.
Well, and we're open to that, and that's what we want, you know. To me, a playground, you know, when I think of a playground, I mean, it's gonna have to be like something you would see at a school. You would have, you know, the rubberized stuff to where if a kid falls off, I mean, that's gonna have to be there, and playground equipment, right? And that's easily a $50,000 thing. A commercial playground is not cheap.
Jordan, we
But
haven't
yes,
put
I mean,
a,
that
we
would have
haven't
to be
put a
altered.
standard on that.
Was that?
We haven't put a standard on that in this text. You could have a field for them to go run and fly kites.
So just an open
You
field?
could have an open area where it's designated for them to be able to
Kick
go
the soccer
do
ball.
something.
Yeah, a couple of
Well,
soccer goals.
Oh,
Give
well, I
them a
mean,
place
that's-
to go.
okay.
Listen, you don't have to build McDonald Playland,
Right.
okay?
Well, okay, well, good. And, you know, we may still, you know, do what I'm talking about. I mean, I think, you know, but no, that, you know, an open space of some sort, you know, I mean, that shouldn't be a problem for anybody. One more thing I did forget, so the Department of HUD basically sets building codes for mobile homes, and so that is, you know, at the federal level. And so there's some fire safety code in this ordinance that is going to be preempted by the Department of Housing and Urban Development's Manufactured Housing Code. So, you know, that's just something to know. That's not something you would really know unless you were in the industry. But it, you know, has all its own regulations, and basically they make them a little less stringent in order to produce the houses cheaper so that they can serve the need that they're designed to serve. So,
We can check that before we get to BFC.
I have a question. You mentioned that you had HUD regulations in construction. Is there any, are they different than, say, Underwriters Laboratory certification of a mobile home?
well, and I don't actually know what that is, but like if you compared it to the IRC, right? So they would be less stringent than the IRC. They're pretty much less stringent than probably anything out there. And the federal government did that in order to incentivize, well, I mean, to basically enable these homes to be built cheaply, basically, so that people, I mean, so that they would be as affordable as possible
Correct.
to the consumer. Like for instance, I believe a 36-inch wide door is required under the Georgia fire safety codes. The HUD would allow for a 32-inch door. So that's just, you know, that's not compliant with the Georgia fire safety code, but it's in the HUD code.
Within the Underwriters Laboratory, they're a regulatory company that for all metal roofed structures, and they've pick up a little switch and it says UL approved, and most all, everything. And they had standards for mobile homes that, and then they'll issue certifications on them, and that is a manufacturing thing, but when you buy a home that has the UL approval on it, at least there's been some engineering done rather than just a haphazard.
Right. And I don't have a deep knowledge of the code. We don't build the homes, of course.
I understand,
So-
but you do pull them in and out. Do people have them in and out of there?
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right,
I don't do that personally. We have third-party
I
contractors.
understand,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, thank you again. All right, any other comments from up front here? Any other discussion, Bruce?
So basically what we're about to look at is your version 5 with the amendment of the pervious versus impervious and so forth. Is that what we're talking about?
And what I heard y'all attempt, in being interested in change, again, what Jordan said in section 4, I'm sorry, E4 little 2I on page 6, was we would add impervious or pervious surface. I heard Frank on page 6, section 5, to put areas with S in as a parenthetical. And y'all had a discussion. Other than that, the only other change that y'all discussed was the time required for restoration to begin in the event a non-conforming use is damaged or destroyed. And y'all had talked, and then Dr. Steve said he supported the text as written. So,
Just one clarification on the double I section that we talked about, the pervious versus impervious.
yes, ma'am.
Dirt is pervious. So, does it covered with a pervious make it an improved?
Yes, that's
Surface.
the intent, yes.
Okay,
Gravel or
I
something
just want to make sure that the language itself can be interpreted, because,
so you don't have a mud hole to park. in.
right,
Good point.
You got all those conditions, Luke?
Yeah, and, I mean, again, just to clarify, you did say as far as the patios and stuff, that would suffice as far as the deck.
If he's got them out there, it satisfies.
Okay,
We didn't put what it had to be.
okay.
We gave somebody the option of either having like a patio, or they could build a deck, or something like that. But you've got an outside space so that somebody's not just stuck in the house without a place to sit that's decent outside.
So we also consider an improved open space a patio.
Correct.
Any other discussion?
I'm good.
If there's no other discussion, I'll entertain a motion on A2301.
Make a motion to approve with the amendments as noted.
Okay, have a motion to approve with amendments as stated. Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Seconded by Mr. Harris. Those in favor signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. Okay, next item on the agenda is A2302. This is an ordinance to amend the Unified Development Ordinance of Spalding County, Georgia, Article 21, Sensitive Land Watershed Protection District, Section 2103, definitions to amend subsection E to define perennial stream, to amend Section 2106, uses exempt from S2 criteria, to add subsection E to identify master plan developments.
Okay, a little bit of background on this. This ordinance has been lying around since Deborah Bell was here, and it's finally getting up to you. It fell through the cracks through successive personnel in the office.
You speak up and in the microphone.
I'm sorry. I'll start over. This ordinance has been sitting around for a while. It was first discussed when Deborah was here, and then it just fell through the cracks through successive personnel changes in that office. Paragon Engineering notified us of a change in definition by EPD of perennial stream and the buffers required for perennial stream. And EPD had changed the definitions and had not sent them to local governments to be implemented. So when this came up, Deborah and I worked to try to find when the ordinance had been, the draft model had been approved.
Go ahead.
Okay. when the draft model ordinance had been approved and whether the counties around us had adopted it. And we found out, at least when Deborah was here, that we were no differently situated than any place else. So, the definition you have in section 2103 for sensitive land watershed protection for perennial stream is taken directly from the EPD model ordinance and revisions that they made nearly 10 years ago, but nobody has adopted. Now, this caused us unique problems because of the amount of master plan developments that have been approved without compliance with this requirement. So, we met with Pulte and discussed the implications for the new definition on the development at Sun City Peachtree. So, we developed the exclusion that you see in section 2106, or that's identified as section 2106. And then we asked EPD to give us guidance as to whether that was an acceptable exclusion. We are still waiting on that guidance. So we are going ahead. We have been implementing the provisions defining perennial stream and the required buffers for a while, and we are now finally bringing this ordinance up to you so that it can be adopted, and that will bring us into compliance with EPD's definition. And if EPD has a problem with our exemption of master plan developments, we will address it if they come back to us. Charles, have you run into this before?
I have.
We were not aware of it until Jeremy at Paragon found this requirement, implemented it on a plat, and then that caused the developer a real problem. And so we investigated it and wound up working with Sun City Peachtree Council up at Troutman to agree to this language.
Mr. Galloway, the most recent conversation we've had on WOTUS, is that going to develop any of this or affect any of this?
I'm sorry, Frank?
Waters of the United States.
You're talking about the new case that came out of the Supremes?
Yeah,
I don't know.
okay.
I don't know.
If it does, we'll address it at that time.
I suspect EPD will do yet another revision that we may or may not receive.
Yeah, and our outsourced consultant, they wanted to make sure that we let you all know that there's going to be constant reasoning for updating our codes moving forward. So get used to us coming to you all in the future with updates. So this is not an end-all.
Okay, any other discussions on this text?
I'm good.
Nope. Okay, if there's no other discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve A2302 as noted.
Okay, have a motion to approve. Have a second.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mary Louise. Those in favor signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. Okay, next item on the agenda is 82303, ordinance to amend the UDO of Spalding County, Georgia, Article 4, General Procedures, Section 411, Variances, Section 413, Special Exceptions, Section 413, A through G, H through N, Section 414, amendments to comply with the requirements of House Bill Section 1405, as codified in Georgia's own procedure law, OCGA 3666-1, so forth. Okay, you.
Okay, if anybody else wants to talk, y'all just let me know. All right. All right. Last year, the legislature passed House Bill 1405. House Bill 1405 had several factors that influenced it. I'm not going to go into that because they're basically of legal consequence, except to say that in order to accommodate appeal processes and make sense of them, this 1405 revised how we do variances, special exceptions, and to some degree, rezoning amendments. So, in order to comply with 1405, we have had to come forward and redo these sections of the zoning ordinance. Now, if you are familiar with, refresh your memory on it, Section 411 covers variances. Section 412 is reserved. Section 413 covers special exceptions. And Section 414 covers zoning, rezoning amendments, and also text amendments. They've also redefined what constitutes a zoning decision. And you will see other actions that are impacted. For example, if you have a proposal for a multifamily development which requires rezoning from a single-family class, the applicant will have to have a preliminary hearing and then wait 6 to 9 months to have the second hearing on the approval of the multifamily development. And that is a response to the city of Atlanta attempting to follow a trend to change the definitions of what can go into a single-family residential district. Okay. Again, that's beyond our scope. All right, another thing that they have done is said that if you have a rezoning required for a development, and that rezoning is concurrent or connected to a required special exception or a required variance, then all of those are accumulated together and go to the Board of Commissioners in one hearing. So, we have had to delineate, and you're going to see this throughout this ordinance, we've had to delineate between those variances that are going to be concurrent with a rezoning as opposed to those variances that are not. For example, Ms. Upshaw, your neighbors who come in regularly to get variances to build a porch from the rear setback, or a special exception to get a home occupation to have a beauty shop in your basement. Okay. So let's walk through this briefly with that background. We have completely redone Section 411. We defined the variance. We set out the criteria for approval of the variance. All of that is from the current ordinance. It's just reorganized. And then we set out the required findings to support granting a variance. Again, none of these factors are changes from the current ordinance. They are just reorganized. Then we have a definition of general variance procedures. Now, one thing that they did do, and I don't know whether they really intended to, was they extended the time for notice for variances and special exceptions, and though they did not extend the time for notice for a rezoning. So, when a variance comes in, Charles looks at it. He, just as we've done before, determines that the person's not in violation of any part of the ordinance. And, or if they are, he requires them to behave and get it corrected. Then he accepts the application, and then it proceeds just like it always has. But look at E on page 4. And this is how section 1405 impacts you. When an application for variance is received, which is concurrent with and in conjunction with an amendment to the zoning ordinance to rezone property from one zoning classification to another, a special exception application, or both, the zoning administrator shall consolidate the variance application with them for hearing. The consolidated application shall be considered pursuant to the amendment procedure required by section 414. So, Charles will take the rezoning application, the special exception application, the variance application, if all three exist. He takes it and he sets a hearing under, as if it is a rezoning.
And just to give you an example, at our previous BOC meeting, a question was raised by one of the commissioners. How is it that we're approving something that was already initially approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals? And it really doesn't make sense. They're approving a rezoning, but maybe some of the conditions they wanted to add or delete from there, that might have been, what's the word I want to use? It might have conflicted with the variances that were approved previously. And the second point I want to make, what Newton is proposing is actually is normal in many of our jurisdictions. So this is not something that's unusual. Usually when a zoning application comes in and it requires a variance and or a special exception, that usually does go to the mayor and council or the county commissioners. So this is something that's already been taking place really throughout jurisdictions. Would you agree with that, Ms. Upshaw?
Yes, but there then would be provisions by which the Board of Commissioners could take action on each not individually, but to say, we approve the rezoning, but we don't like variance 3 and 4.
That's correct.
Correct.
And so they would approve with exceptions to those two items, whatever they were, that they don't like those. So it's not putting in jeopardy the opportunity to open up for a good thing to happen for the county good, but also putting dangerous things in place, violations of rules that
Correct.
might be there for the safety or for the preservation of the community, so.
Correct. And you also have a situation where a developer is going to look at, for example, 150 lots, and he sees that 10 of those lots are unbuildable, or they're oddly shaped. So you all can make that decision to grant those variances or not, or just say, hey, just use that for open space.
And the standard for the variance will still be the same.
Correct. They still have to meet the guidelines for hardship.
Correct. And the standard for the special exception will still be the same, even though they will be making a unified, or considering it a unified hearing.
Right.
Now, I'm assuming, Charles, we're gonna have them vote on each application separately.
When you say each application, what do you
The variance application, the special exception application, the rezoning application.
mean?
Because it's not clear in 1405 what the procedure is. Go ahead.
I think that from some experience that I've had, that the Board of Commissioners would take action to approve the zoning and X out something that staff had said as a recommendation for a condition, or add their own condition, or say no variances, or just these limited variances. They have the ability to take an X-Acto knife to it and knock it down to what they really want it to say. So you're not presenting it as 7 little individual things, but a one thing that they could take action on, but they could address individually or as part of their vote.
The burden would be, if I'm hearing you correctly, Ms. Upshaw, the burden would be on that applicant to incorporate what they may need or not need into that overall request.
so that they can live with a few things. They could be extravagant,
Right.
so that they would get what they really wanted.
Well, and also, if you're the applicant, your strategy would be to have a list for the Board of Commissioners when you get there for what you want,
Right.
and have it written out so that they don't craft the motion from the bench.
I just one more, two more things that I read. I didn't see it. This moved kind of past me kind of quick, but under C, requirements for findings to support the granting, number 9, I think there's a sentence issue there. Or maybe I just didn't read it correctly, but, and the new one
You're
may say
correct.
something different than this
You're
printing.
correct. Page 3,
Page 3, yes.
yes, you're correct. There's a syntax issue.
Okay.
I'll correct.
And then on D3, and this is just maybe me being arrogant, but it says no application to be accepted from a person in violation, but it doesn't address whether it's this property or some other property they own somewhere in Spalding County.
It should be for the property that's
The
involved.
property, instead of, if that's assumed, I didn't catch that, so.
I'll make that clear. All right, so if, yes,
I
sir.
have on that particular issue, if you don't accept any additional, the application, how would you be able to fix the whole problem? Just having I mean, he's in non-compliance, correct? And now we don't want to give him the opportunity to fix that?
As a practical matter, and I don't know how Charles has handled this in other jurisdictions, but as a practical matter, we have been very practical in how we handle that, using the requirement that you've got to be in compliance as an incentive to bring them into compliance, more so than using it as a sharp hammer to say, we're not going to consider something.
Okay,
So they could respond, if I can, by saying, the reason I'm asking for the variance is in part that I'm gonna go forward and move. I can go ahead and fix these 2 things or whatever, and then if you'll give me this variance, I'll finish the other 7 or 6 or whatever
okay,
things.
all right.
It can't just be simply, we're trying to meet our bottom line. You have to have,
No,
other
it's not
reasons.
pocketbook stuff.
Yeah.
Although most of the time it is.
Do what?
I said most of the time it is.
Of course it is.
What revolves around money?
If the variance, let's go, picking back up with the ordinance, if you look at, again, 4F, page 4, subpart F, the variance procedures have not changed except for the time period that's been extended by the ZPL amendment. And the procedures for a simple variance in front of the Board of Appeals have not changed. If you will look at page 5, this may not have significance to y'all, but it is part of the reason for these amendments. You will see that in G, previously, if you took an appeal from the Board of Appeals, you filed what was called a petition for writ of certiorari to get the authority to file in the Superior Court. Spalding County is aware of that because we were the first county to require that. That has now been changed, but they have made clear that what the Board of Appeals does in approving or denying a variance is a quasi-judicial decision as opposed to a zoning legislative decision, and that is a distinction of significance in terms of how you get a case into Superior Court if you're not happy here. All right, let's move to Article 4, General Procedures, Section 413. The special exceptions provisions follow the exact same pattern. The definition of what a special exception is, criteria for approval, required findings, then general special exception procedures. And then we get to page 6, subpart E, special exception procedures before the Board of Commissioners. when an application for special exception is received, which is concurrent with or in conjunction with an amendment to the zoning ordinance to rezone property from one classification to another, a variance application, or both, the zoning administrator shall consolidate the special exception application with them for hearing. Now, that still leaves certain special exceptions before the Board of Appeals, such as, like I said, home occupations and minor things. And then, if you will note, on page 7, subpart G again, on appeals, a special exception that is coming out of the Board of Appeals is going to be deemed quasi-judicial as well. Now, that brings us to rezoning amendments. Again, let me back up a second. You will note, if you look in your code, we have two sections that I did not address yet, and that is G prime and G double prime, which are our special exception subdivisions, and the special exception for a placement of a manufactured home. We are going to come back and deal with those separately. Right. Those were left out intentionally. And if you'll notice, we have taken section 413, and you will note that it used to have provisions H through N, and we have eliminated all of them to simplify the text. All right, now that takes us to, for amendments. There are two types of amendments. First is an application to rezone. The second is a text amendment. So we set out, following the exact same pattern again, criteria for approval of rezoning. There's no change in the criteria that are listed. We've just played with where they are in the ordinance. The required findings for the amendment to be done. Again, no change, just changing except location. Then required procedures for an amendment to the official zoning map, and that covers the Planning Commission. We do the general stuff where Charles accepts the application, then looks at it, and he does make a determination whether the application seeks a rezoning that's consistent with the comp plan. If it is not consistent with the comp plan, he requires them to file an application to amend the comp plan. That is in the ordinance now. Again, it's just relocated. Then we get, and we address in the next section, I'm at page 10 now, procedures before the Planning Commission. These have not changed. I did eliminate the requirement that you prepare a report to go to the Board of Commissioners, and your minutes will be your report. I don't know when we've prepared a report. All right. Then procedures before the Board of Commissioners. Again, these are essentially the same. There are virtually no changes in this. There is a formatting issue that I ran into on page 12. No one in my office has been able to get that corrected. We will get it corrected before we get a numbering, before we get to DOC. And then,
Let me interrupt you just a second. If you back up, they were talking about posting a notice in a conspicuous place. Remember the problem we had where it was put at the end of a cul-de-sac, and we had people who had no idea what was going on. Is there maybe something like a conspicuous place at the entrance there, or I'm just thinking out loud because we had that problem before.
we have never had a specific direction for where the published sign or the sign had to be posted, essentially relying on conspicuous. And usually it requires it to be on the property, which is the problem that was encountered in that. I think that was a cul-de-sac street coming off of, it's down in the east part of the county. But the provisions requiring signage, by and large, require it to be on the lot that's subject to rezoning. Do you agree with that, Charles?
I do.
Mr. Harris, we've also made some additional changes. We've changed the color of the sign so that it is much more visible to those who are passing by. and we're changing the direction of the sign. In fact, I'll use an example. Tiemann Road at Smoke Road was one of the examples. Passerbys were taking the signs down and removing the signs and putting them in the woods. And our Public Works Department got engaged. We changed the sign through our signage shop. We made them yellow, and we faced them so that it would be very visible from both sides, both directions of travel.
Good.
And then we posted a metal sign that indicated that it was a felony to remove the signs for rezoning. As soon as we did that, we didn't have any more issues with the sign. But I've actually gotten some positive feedback that the signs are now yellow and much easier to read.
Good.
Great.
Thank you, Dr.
They actually
Ledbetter.
got bigger too, so you can, the text got bigger as well, so it's easy to read.
Okay. Again, these provisions are already largely in the code. I will note, again, dealing with appeals, this is page 13, and this follows the new state law. Any decision of the Board of Commissioners to approve or deny an application for amendment to the official zoning map shall be deemed a legislative action as opposed to a judicial action. And again, that is significant, even though y'all don't see it. The next section deals with text amendments. It follows the exact same format that you've had seen with all the others. The criteria, then procedures before the Board of Commissioners and procedures before the Planning Commission. So, and again, these aren't being changed, they're just being rearranged to make it, hopefully, make it simpler. And of course, the appeal of a if there were to be an appeal of a text amendment, that is plainly a legislative decision. That takes us to page 16, and we have this provision allowing conditions to be placed on approval. What this does, it makes it clear that an application that's initiated that seeks to change a condition of approval imposed on approval of either an application to amend the official zoning map, a special exception, or a variance will proceed according to the same procedures by which the original application was approved. So if it was a special exception application with conditions, it goes through the special exception process. If it was a variance approved with conditions and somebody's not happy with the conditions, it goes through the variance process. All right, that should, again, with the exception of G prime and G double prime, that should get us in compliance with 1405. Also, I hope, makes the operation of the ordinance a little easier. Questions?
You're gonna get sick of me saying this, but a question, what is overtax any street presently existing? What's the definition of overtax?
That's in the rezoning
Yeah, it's under B, on my page 8, Article 4, Section 1414, B. Double I under G.
G double I. Ms. Upshaw, that is a provision that has been in our ordinance forever, and I just carried it forward.
Okay.
And everybody talks about traffic, and that's what I assume it qualifies as.
Okay.
But I just carried forward the text that we have.
Just as an aside, if the board is in consideration of making any changes, now is the time to do so, as we are in the middle stages of updating all of our ordinances through Muni Code. So if there are changes that need to be considered, now would be a good chance to bring this forward.
Then maybe I could have a personal preference request, and you can ignore it if you choose to. If we could have the chairs of committees rather than the chairman of the committees. It's just a personal preference, but it's something I wanted to say.
Actually, that's a wonderful position to have. And one of the considerations that we have made back to MuniCode, the attorney that's working MuniCode, is to take all references for he, she, chairman out of the ordinance and make it gender neutral.
Thank you. Is a motion?
I'll entertain a motion if there's no other discussion.
I'm good.
So moved. So moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Unanimous. All right. Okay. Next amendment is A2304, ordinance to amend the Unified UDO ordinance of Spalding County, Georgia to amend Appendix D, Spalding County Soil Erosion and Sedimentation Control Ordinance by replacing it in its entirety. If you're gonna do it, that's the way to do it.
Y'all give me a second. Eva, this is the newest of the ordinances. Could you put that one up there, please?
Version 3.6.6.23.
Yes, ma'am.
Red line or green, or clean?
It doesn't matter.
Okay, I got red line it on.
Okay, this one relates, y'all give me just a second. Okay, as our trip through the fun-filled land of ordinance revision continues, if you look on your agenda in C 2, ordinance to amend Appendix D. All right, what we're doing is we are taking the soil erosion sedimentation control ordinance out of the zoning ordinance, and we are putting it into the general code. The reason being that it is not an ordinance that deals with land use, it deals with land development. And we are having to amend we're having to do significant revisions to the soil erosion and sedimentation control ordinance, generally in order to satisfy EPD requirements that have to be met. So, the ordinance you have in front of you now is a very simple ordinance. All it does is it takes Appendix D out of the zoning ordinance and deletes it. And in one more ordinance, you're going to re-adopt it as part of the general code. Y'all are scowling.
Ready to move?
Well, I did read through it earlier today, and the question I had was, there's some pretty fine details on there about enforcement and a lot of data to be collected.
John, we're not to the reenactment of the soil erosion ordinance. This is
Okay.
just to delete from Appendix D.
Oh, okay.
The other's coming.
agree to delete in its entirety Appendix D.
That's the motion.
Repeat, please.
We need to delete Appendix D officially.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Second. Okay. Those in favor signify by raising your right hand.
I think Mr. Newton's getting us ready for a review of how to reenact this.
All right, the next one, Ava.
What page are we on there?
John, your next one.
Crazy. That's my version.
Okay, I lost my sheet there for a moment. Okay, number two, A 2304 is actually the ordinance to amend the UDO to Appendix D, Spalding County Soil and Erosion Sedimentation Control Ordinance, General Ordinance.
Okay, just to be clear, consideration of ordinance is not requiring a public hearing. A 2305 is number one, so you've moved to number two, is that
That's correct.
Yes.
correct? Right, do we need to do number one before we do number
It
two?
would be better, yes, we need to follow the
Okay.
agenda.
Let's stop and back up. A 2305, I guess I need to put my glasses on. Ordinance to amend the UDO, to amend Chapter 4, illicit discharge in connection of stormwater ordinance.
All right. This is an ordinance that we are required to implement. It is a revision to the general code, and it deals with illicit discharge and stormwater runoff. We were notified by EPD that Spalding County was not in compliance with having that code provision, and the county has retained a consultant to give us the necessary text and amendments to bring us into compliance, and that's the ordinance you have in front of you.
Okay, and that's my question. Who actually goes out and monitors? Is it through the state, or do our code enforcement people do it? Or is it the burden of the zoning administrator?
It's going to be Community Development Department. We have a environmental specialist that's in training right now with our outsourced consultant in enforcing this ordinance.
Okay, have we previously had a position like that?
Yes, we
Yes.
have.
Yes.
This was Tim's position.
Tim Bethune's position,
Okay.
it has been vacant for a few months now, but we have always had that position in place. And what they do is they oversee all the things that need to be tested and measured by the EPD.
And since Mr. Bethune moved on to bigger and better things, Mr. Scott Sullivan has made the transition into community development, and he is serving in that role. The consultant that the county has contracted is providing training and oversight for Mr. Sullivan until he is in a position where he can take on this role full-time without oversight.
Correct.
And this is a job that one person can comfortably do?
This is a job that one person is doing, and we have a schedule, a planned schedule that Mr. Reese has put together for us that will oversight and manage this role for our MS4 report, which is included in this requirement. The MS4 and the ability to issue permits is a big part of this program that we have in place. Software is a part of this because we do have a requirement to manage the inventory for all of the stormwater that goes across our community. There's some additional components that the county is putting into place to include within our next budget, a flyover for all impervious areas across our community to understand where we are suffering as a result of stormwater, And the phase 2 for that program is to put in place a strategic plan for how to deal with that stormwater runoff.
If I might add, Steve, also is going to involve training. We'll be required to train the community and pretty much provide workshops, what have you, going to the schools, what have you, in terms of addressing the issue of stormwater drainage, and erosion control.
And just as an aside, kudos to Ms. Morales for running point on some cleanups across our county over the last month or so. She has been doing a great job at bringing together volunteers to help clean up some of our streams. And all of these items go back into our MS4 report, which is a part of our erosion and sedimentation program.
Dr. Ledbetter,
Yes, sir.
I'm on the City of Griffin's Environmental Council, and do we in a position to try to coordinate any of our stormwater stuff with the city?
So we have actually been working with Alexa in the stormwater department. She has been a tremendous help to Scott and I in getting a better understanding of what we actually have to manage and how
Okay.
to manage. So we have been working hand in hand with them for the past, 4 to 6 months now.
Yeah, we're developing that partnership, Mr. Harris, and very pleased to say that our team is working very well together.
That's good. We have just lost Bryce Martin, which of course we hate doing that because he just did a stellar job on that, but things happen.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Bruce, you got anything? Yes. Mary Louise?
I did just a matter of, I don't have an A2305 in my book. I don't know what I'm looking for.
You have the ordinance.
I've got a very large document, and if it's supposed to be segued, it's
I think that was more we're getting rid of.
this is where we are now?
I think
Yes.
this is IDDA.
IDDA.
IDDA is where we are now, that next.
Oh, okay.
Version
just-
4 or 5.
Just saying I couldn't equate with where we were on the agenda.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that, Mary Louise. I was looking for the other, yeah.
Okay.
I have an acronym.
Do you have the illicit discharge ordinance?
I do. I didn't know that that's what
The acronym got everybody.
the,
Okay.
I didn't have the
I apologize
numerical
for that.
reference that the chair read as the next item.
I read about 3 things, so, you know, take your choice. All right, we have any other discussion on 2305? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Are we gonna go through it specifically?
Well, we're gonna vote on 2305. I think Newton's kind of given us the package here.
This ordinance has no original thought from us in it.
Right?
It is, the directions we've received is this is something we have to have in this form to
Okay.
get to EPD.
Question. Does this ordinance prevent someone from washing their car with a
No.
detergent?
No, we walked through that. If you will look at, that's that water line flushing provision, isn't it, guys?
Yes.
But that's for the county.
No, it would be applicable to anybody. There's a, no, we had a discussion with the expert on this, the consultant, and this identified, for example, look on page 6, the following discharges are exempt.
Are you talking about section 84008?
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Thank you.
A1. it certainly appears to me that that's specifically by a government agency. I may be reading it incorrectly.
No, no, as I recall, Rebecca identified this as a general application, isn't
That's
that correct,
correct.
Eva?
That's correct.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is Spalding County, we need to incent people to wash the cars.
I know.
I feel attacked.
Like I said, we had no original thought in this. The consultant has given us this text. I don't have the expertise to answer questions. The only expertise I have is to be able to take what she said and put it into an ordinance that fits our code.
So to answer Mr. Allen's question, it doesn't prevent you from washing your car, but what it does is, for example, if Mr. Scott Sullivan goes out and tests a stream, and there's a substance in the test that comes back that says it's either a chemical or a detergent or whatever, we can always trace it back to a neighbor just washing his car, and that would be the explanation as to how that chemical got into that water source.
Okay.
I would consider, perhaps in future date, or to look at it reasonably, to say, there's some language in here that may be a little bit difficult to enforce. Language like reasonable delay, unreasonable delay, or reasonable time limit. I've been on the brunt end of that before, and definitions of reasonable is almost impossible to create, but it has gotten some people in trouble. So I'm just saying that. Whatever's reasonable and customary for one may or may not be for others, so get ready.
Well, the goal right now is to satisfy EPD.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they don't give you a whole lot of, I realize that, they don't give you a whole lot of flexibility, and I can understand where that would come from, but those are the kind of things that are just little gotchas that we see.
Right, and going back to what Nick's reference there, you know, under 4004 F, illicit connections, it talks about any drain or conveyance, whether on the surface or subsurface, which allows an illegal discharge to enter a storm drain system, included but not limited to any conveyance which allows non-stormwater discharge, including sewage, processed water, wash water, to enter the storm drain. It could be questionable.
I think it's crafted so that they can put the hammer to you about most anything.
I think the important thing is that we have the language, so that EPD will let us be our own enforcers and not be
Right.
following behind us everywhere we go.
Right.
And you certainly don't want a consent order as part of your history,
Right.
That's exactly
That's
correct.
exactly.
just saying.
Well, I would think that personal residential property use would be handled somewhat different or given more latitude than a commercial establishment, a business, you know, where a business may dump 55 gallons of detergent and someone that's washing their house with a pressure washer may use a pint or a quart, whatever, once a year. So that's my concern, that we don't apply the same standards for a commercial operation that you would a personal residential property. Does that make sense to y'all?
Well, it does, and then there's a situation where, as your neighbor, I went out and I was having flooding in my basement, and so I built a little channel that would drain off water so that now your basement floods. It's the same thing as if Shell Oil Company had a situation where they were flooding the Mexican restaurant next door. It's, the effect is the same. The law has to be written, in most instances, I think, I'm not the expert by any chance, but it has to be written so that it's enforceable by the people who are here operating, but they have a good sense of what they're dealing with. And
And the spotlight's gonna be on, didn't mean to interrupt you, Ms. Upshaw, but the spotlight's gonna definitely be on the bigger commercial, industrial, even big residential development versus singling out homeowners.
But if you're pressurizing your house or washing your driveway or whatever, and the water slops over on your neighbor, chances are your neighbor's not gonna complain. But,
No,
but if
they
a
do it in
big
a-
something does, then you just go to mediation.
This says if we get biodegradable or otherwise detergent on there, they could complain.
They
could be
can. I mean, that's
biodegradable.
not to say you can't. The state and federal laws allow you to complain if there's one drop of difference.
Right.
But the logic behind it is, and then there's you, and what would you do, kind of thing, so. I'm sorry, I'm editorializing, but.
Well, should we put in the regulations, there is a difference between private residential property,
No, this, what's before you all is a model ordinance that we have to approve as a jurisdiction from EPD. So it's just a matter of adopting it or not.
But we don't want to give this ordinance a bad name as somebody reads it and says, hey, I can't wash my car anymore. I can't wash my house. I mean, that's what, I hear it all the time. People find out that I'm on this commission and they go, oh, you guys don't have any sense. She's all, just all the code of complaint. But all I'm saying is we need to kind of let them know that we realize that they're not gonna be held to the same standards as a commercial business, manufacturing.
And Mr. Allen, hopefully this can help you feel a little bit more at ease. We get these kind of calls all the time. So,
Well, I'm not the only one. My neighbor
it's-
is a perfect example of that.
yeah, it's just
They
situation.
won't ever pave our road until he passes away, but
Right.
that's beside.
You can't help on that, can you?
No, I can't help that. But I'm just saying,
on the passage.
generally speaking for the government, as I work for the federal government, for the Army, so, you don't want bad publicity. You want them to think that, oh, yeah, they're taking us into consideration. They're going to have good quality water. That's what we want, is good quality water. But I still need to wash my car.
Mr. Allen, if it helps a little bit as well, we are always going to be able to tell if it's the difference between somebody washing a car and somebody draining
I
their
hear you.
washer
Okay.
machine water out constantly.
That's it. All right.
But
That's
we,
it, Denise.
we
I
will be
understand.
able to handle each situation appropriately as it presents itself.
I don't think, Nick, I don't think anybody disagrees with the premise that the guy washing his car is supposed to be treated differently than the commercial guy who dumps out a pile of, a huge amount of whatever it is. The problem is, does our independent thought of putting an exclusion or different language in affect our ability to get this ordinance approved by EPD so that we can come into compliance with what we have to have in order to enforce this? EPD has set a standard that this is their model ordinance that they expect
And I
us to
understand
adopt.
that. But, you know, going back to what your mom and dad told you when you were a kid, just because other people do it wrong doesn't make you have to do it wrong.
That's true if EPD's not involved.
Okay.
Okay.
They're looking to us to adopt something that can fall under their definition of best management practices, but they are not going to get down off of their nice big air-conditioned office and come running down to Spalding County and get after our folks that are washing their house or washing their car. They're looking for us as a government to say, we got a rule and we're going to enforce it. And then we enforce it.
I understand that.
Okay.
I just thoroughly understand it.
Okay, we all know fair isn't always fair, so let's, if there's no other discussion, let's go ahead and approve this or vote on it or whatever. So I'll entertain a motion.
Can I have one additional thought?
But go ahead.
I know. Under section E, section 8, 4014, I want to throw this out there, and I just hope Mr. Ledbetter, Dr. Ledbetter doesn't get upset with me. I would like some way for Spalding County to assist with the resources as necessary when violators do not have the ability to comply with the cleanup or mitigating said violations. Violators would eventually reimburse the county for the help that's provided. If you have a small business that's got a problem that he's in violation and we're gonna shut him down or fine him $1,000 a day or whatever, the county, I believe, has an obligation to help him mitigate that. And at that point, he would reimburse the county. It may take him a year, 2 years to reimburse the county for those, but those people that are working there will be continuing to pay taxes on their, and that business would be open, and he would be paying his taxes there also. So it's a win-win for the county.
I think that's too much of a hall pass, Nick.
Okay.
But I'm just one person.
What do you think, sir?
I actually agree with Mr. Harris. I think it's too much of a hall pass. I also do not believe that the county has the funds to manage that level of requirement. I think it would be a burden to the other citizens within the county.
It would be, but being a small business, we would hope that the mitigation would be small enough that the county could financially help it or underpin it, guarantee a loan.
Yeah, gratuity is not allowed.
Okay.
It's illegal by law, so that would constitute a gratuity, and we would have a struggle actually providing that level of loan or supporting that business to help them mitigate the cleanup.
Do you understand what
I do. I do.
my purpose is to have clean water?
Mine too. Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
If there's no other discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
It just says they're authorized, doesn't say they have to.
I move to adopt as discussed.
Okay, I have a motion to adopt. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mr. Harris. Those in favor signify by raising your right hand. I don't think Frank voted, but hey.
He did.
Okay. Okay. I think we got the last one up.
Last one. All right, this is the replacement of the soil erosion ordinance that was in Appendix D into the Spalding County Code. And from From our perspective, this is the exact same thing we just dealt with. This is a standard ordinance given to us from EPD. And our obligation is to get the ordinance enacted. And essentially what happened here is, EPD this is a requirement from EPD for the county to adopt this ordinance, which is their current model. So again, no original thought went into this from any of us, and this is recommended by Rebecca Lindsay, the county's consultant on EPD compliance.
If I could comment, this is a good model ordinance, and in no case does it say the county has to do so-and-so. It says the county may do so-and-so. The county is authorized to go on your land, but it doesn't say the county has to go on your land and shut you down. So,
Well, I don't seem to have that either.
You have to back up.
Back up.
It's ahead of the,
We've done somebody match.
yeah, it's in the 50s.
We've got the wrong one pulled up.
It's in the 50s.
It's a different version, what we're looking at here on the screen than what we're looking at.
Yeah, it is.
So I don't,
We got we got minor changes to address EPD things from the consultant this morning. So these changes, the last changes were made this afternoon. And the last version is version 5. However, there are no substantive changes from version 4. They're just words, minor additions, and changes.
we got a version 3 pulled up on the screen, so I'm just confused.
I have version 5 in hand if you want a hard
That
copy.
would be nice.
I'm fine with just knowing what we're dealing with.
is this the one that said you could thin the buffer if you wanted to? There was one of those I ran across.
I don't know what I'm looking at.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Yeah. This is grand since I printed. No, it's 22 pages. Okay.
Charles,
Mercy.
And so these adjustments you've got in here then, in the last one, we weren't gonna adjust the EPDs, but now we're adjusting the EPDs?
I'm sorry, Bruce.
I said, with what I'm understanding, before we were not gonna adjust the EPD requirement guidelines, but now in this one, we are making some adjustments to the EPD guidelines?
These are principally stylistic changes, Bruce,
Okay.
where Rebecca made recommendations regarding the identification, for example, of the Georgia Soil and Water Conservation Commission as opposed to the Talaga Soil and Water District.
Right.
And if you'll see in this last, there mainly, you also see changes to references to subparts of other sections to correct how we had identified them. So, the bottom line to this is she has taken what the model is and done minor revisions to accommodate certain things in formatting and cross-references to other ordinances. And I say she's done it, that's not correct. She sent them to us and we put them in at her direction. And there are not, if you had, I think we sent V3 out before the weekend. If you saw V3, you are essentially looking at the same thing at V5.
That's what
It's
I read.
literally changing pretty much just nets and words here and there.
Page 13, Bruce, where you can prune the buffer after it's stabilized. That surprised me.
Right.
See, I thought it had to be undisturbed.
Well,
And I might add, because this is going to be a code section, not part of the zoning ordinance, we brought it to y'all because y'all have historically looked at these before they went to the Board of Commissioners. But y'all do not have a formal role to play. It is advisory. It is essentially a voluntary role. But we think it is still useful to get a recommendation from P and Z to get up to the commissioners.
Well, I think it's good for us to know, too.
Of course.
Any other particular notes that you want to add?
No, Bruce, that's pretty much it. This was a long and tortuous ordinance to format, and to put the numbers to where it's in our code, correctly. But, again, not a lot of virtually no independent thought other than making modifications just for the groups or the place that Spalding County is, but not substantively as to the any of the requirements.
I'm amazed that surface mining is exempted.
Surface mining has always been exempt from soil erosion, as is all agriculture. You can clear 1,000 acres of farmland and have no obligations under soil erosion sedimentation control.
As is granite.
But if you clear 1 acre for a residential house or more, you are under an obligation to deploy soil erosion protection.
Or dig a pistol pit, too.
Okay, any other discussion? Well, I'll entertain a motion on 2304.
I'll move to approve version 5
All right, motion to
as
approve
submitted.
2304, version 5.
Can I get a second for that?
no, I'll second it.
Seconded by Mary Louise. Those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Okay. All right. Next item up is the approval of the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, would the commission entertain tabling the approval of the minutes for consideration of revision?
Sure.
So,
Do we need to vote on that?
That would be awesome. If you'll table it, we'll bring it back.
I move that we table the minutes.
Do I have a second? Second. Those in favor signify by raising your right hand. They take.
As part of that, we're putting in who actually made the motion and stuff.
You said you made the motion.
No, I'm talking about on the minute.
I didn't make the motion.
Who made the motion?
You
Second.
motioned it.
The chairman.
Bruce.
That, he was one of them. I made the motion.
You made the
We got it tabled, it's good.
Bruce made the motion, John made the second.
All right, next item is the director's comments. Does the director have any comments?
I have none, just elated to be here, and I'm honored to serve Spalding County. It's been a pleasure to meet you all tonight, and look forward to working with you all in the future.
Okay, thank you, glad to meet you as well. I think, given the hour, we will forego the commissioner comments unless somebody's really got something heavy on their chest. And so with that, we're down to a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thanks, Newton.
Plus, I already gave Steve the commissioner comment.
So he must have
No, I wasn't taking.